Welcome to Bears on Tap, hosted by Kyle Juice Michalski, Quinten Q Krzysko, Sonny Verma, and the one and only Ron Luce, bringing you all the news, analysis, and opinions on the charter franchise, Chicago Bears.
And welcome back. We are Bears on Tap. My name is Quinten Krzysko. I am joined by Sonny Verma. We are here to talk some Chicago Bears. We're coming out of the bye. Bears are 4-2. We're feeling good about it. Sonny, how are you doing on this fine Tuesday evening?
You know, Q, I enjoyed doing the positional grades and, the player grades, but I've been itching to watch more Bears football. And, I can't wait. It's going to be a big game. Obviously, there's some narratives that may have changed, but regardless, Bears football is Bears football, and I can't wait for Sunday.
Man, I've got to say, there is it's definitely easier when the Bears are doing good stuff or there's stuff to be excited about, young players to be grinding the film, the writing, the podcasts every week. But I don't know, the bye week was so refreshing to me this week. I just feel like I'm back week one, ready to go. I needed a little break, and now we're here, we're flying, we're here to talk about the Chicago Bears. So Sonny, how are you feeling? If you were to give a state of the Bears right now in the bye, how are you feeling? Where do you see this thing going in the next few weeks?
Optimistic, especially, it was nice we got to do that exercise where we got to look over some of these players. The key players, the ones that are most important to the Bears' future over the last few weeks, week by week, are getting better and better. So for me, I'm hoping that through the rest of the next 3-4 week chunk that, that continues to happen. And that, once those last 8 games start with interdivisional matchups, we'll have our best face forward at that point.
Yeah. I can't help but almost be I know I wanted to see Jayden Daniels, Caleb Williams. You wanted to see Jayden Daniels, Caleb Williams. We all wanted it. And I think a big part of that is, for me at least, I'm pretty secure in Caleb Williams being the dude. And not that Washington fans aren't or shouldn't be with Jayden Daniels, but I was just ready to go see him go head to head because I thought it was going to be fun. And I feel good about Caleb Williams, the prospect, being the dude. So I was just excited to kind of put some of that conversation behind us. If we are getting Marcus Mariota, as in the comments, Sean Gardner is telling us Mariota may be starting. This conversation is going to go on for about another year.
Yeah.
At this point, because it's they do play the entire NFC East next season, so they will see each other next year. But it kind of sinks to not put that behind us at all after this game, because that's what I was kind of looking forward to, that conversation dying down a little.
I'd argue it could be more than a year. This could be, one of the NFL's next big rivalries between the two. When you talk about, 2 quarterbacks obviously drafted right next to each other, this could be, one of those where it's not ultimately decided until the first one that wins the Super Bowl. Or, if you're really patient, you just wait for their careers to end. But, I've seen Caleb progress, getting better and better every single week. I'm very confident saying that we made the right pick at quarterback, but I've talked to a couple Commanders fans, and I, watched a couple Commanders content creators just to be ready for this episode, and they feel just the same about Jayden Daniels. And so, ultimately, that's good for football. That's good for Bears fans. They're there's no insecurity one way or the other. I think Bears fans show a little more of that insecurity, but it's only because it's only one of the quarterbacks that's gotten that rookie of the week every single week, and we just kind of want our prized possession to get the publicity that he deserves as well. I don't think there's any sense of jealousy or anything like that. And like you said, I want to see Caleb Williams versus Jayden Daniels. And I saw someone in the comment section of a different show talk about how this is a lose-lose proposition now, that if you beat the Commanders without Jayden Daniels, well, it was without Jayden Daniels, and if you lose to them, how can you lose to the Commanders? I think it's a win-win. For me, it's if Jayden Daniels plays, then you're talking about you have a Caleb Williams versus Jayden Daniels matchup, right? Two of the premier up-and-coming quarterbacks. But if he doesn't play, well, you know what? That hopefully makes the matchup tough or easier. And right now, the Bears need this victory over Commanders. I don't know if Bears fans realize how important a W on Sunday is, especially when you really look into the future and talk about possible tiebreaker situations. Like at this point, like, Philadelphia is starting to turn it around. You might be battling the Commanders for one of those wild card spots. And if you have the same record, it's going to go to the head-to-head winner. And so that's why this Sunday is going to absolutely matter.
That's a great point. I hadn't even considered that, but that is the Commanders fall down a little. They end up in a wild card. The Bears get Mariota this weekend. They win. Then the next week, they're in Arizona. Arizona is a tough place to play, but that team is not a juggernaut by any means. So say you get a win there. Then you get a win at home against New England. You're sitting at 7-2. And none of that sounds unrealistic, right? Like that all sounds perfectly capable. And that's before you get into the division, that gauntlet of the last 8 games where you're like, okay, Green Bay, Minnesota, Detroit, San Francisco, Minnesota, Detroit, Seattle, Green Bay. But at that point, you're saying we can win 3 of those 8. We're in the playoffs. Like we're a 10-win team. And you might be looking at seeding or the 7th spot with those 10 wins. Like it matters. So I'm very much in the neighborhood of, I don't care if they're starting quarterbacks or not, win the game, whatever helps us get more wins before we get to this rough stretch, because the rough stretch is coming. And I can be as optimistic as I want about it. It's going to be a rough stretch.
Yeah. And like we both agree, I think the magic number is 10. I think a loss on Sunday makes getting to 10 a lot tougher. Washington has a good record, don't get me wrong, but I do think there might be a little regression to the mean with their team. I just don't know if they're as good as their record shows. We'll find out on Sunday. But, if we lose on Sunday, I fully expect us, spoiler alert for the end of the episode, I do expect the Bears to come out victorious. But if we lose on Sunday, all of a sudden, I feel like I have to kind of readjust my expectations for the next couple of games, because let's be honest, the same thing can be said about the Bears. Like we've kind of beaten up on some very poor NFL teams. And so maybe right now I'm riding a high over the last couple of weeks and I need to adjust my expectations for this team. And so right now, if 7 is the goal, a victory against the Commanders is going to be huge to get there.
Absolutely will be. And as you're saying that, I think that's a good point to transition into some of the talk about the Commanders, right? And so some of the talk about this game. And we always want to start that off with the weather report. So we're looking at, they're playing in Washington, folks. It's a high of 62, feels about 68 on that day, but we're talking about a 4:15, 4:25 kickoff Eastern time. So about 3:25 Central, but we're talking about an afternoon game where you're probably not getting the high of the day either. So it's going to be a little chillier out there. Up to 14 mile an hour winds, but no real rain. So it's going to be mostly clear, little wind, but nothing like we've seen Caleb deal with at Soldier Field. Like we've seen him deal with some pretty windy days already there, but it is going to be a little chillier, which will be interesting to see from the player standpoint. This will probably be the first game of the year where you're talking 60s, maybe below 60s for the Bears, as far as I can remember, at least. I don't think they played in one that was much below like mid 60s at all this year.
Yeah, I can't recall, who's that more in favor of? I'm not really sure. I don't know if you have an opinion. Like, you're still talking about pristine football weather. It's not too hot outside. It's not too cold outside. Which is good for the Bears. Because again, I think the talent level, and I think we're about to get into this, like I don't see any units that I think the Commanders are necessarily much stronger than the Bears on. And so if you keep everything neutral, then I think that increases the opportunities for the Bears to come out victorious.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you're saying that. As you're saying, I don't know if there's an opinion of who that favors or not. The only thing that I can think of, which I don't think there's even a lot of validity to, but the only thing that comes to mind is Jayden Daniels always played in warm weather states, and Caleb Williams played high school ball there in the what's it called, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, the DMV area.
Yeah.
So he knows the climate. He's played in it. I don't think there's a lot of merit to it though. Like we're talking about mid 60s to high 50s. Like I don't think there's anything to really discuss there. So let's get into the Commanders here, the commies, as I so nicely put in our private chat. Now, the Commanders, they've been on a run, man. Like I was on record leading into the season, and I will eat this statement all year long. I thought they were number one pick territory. I really did. I looked at this roster and I said, man, you got a rookie 3rd round pick or 4th round pick in Brandon Coleman starting at left tackle. You have a bunch of okay offensive linemen, like essentially backups from Kansas City and Allegretti and Andrew Wiley, who you paid to start. Tyler Biotish away from Zach Martin. He was with the Cowboys before, played with some outstanding talent around him. I wasn't sure how that was going to go. And Sam Cosmi was a good football player. But I was sitting here going, I don't know how this offensive line works. And this defensive talent, I'm not really sure is enough. But like I said, I got to eat crow on this. They're sitting here at 5-2. And Dan Campbell, I did not want the Bears to hire Dan Campbell. With the year, like they interviewed him, and there was a lot of smoke about the Bears hiring Dan Campbell, and they ended up hiring Eberflus, and I was happy with that. But I was very anti Dan, or I said Dan Campbell.
Dan Quinn, right? Yeah,
come on, man. Dan Quinn, very attacking oriented DC, but also very cover 3 oriented, and I don't love his X's and O's. Whenever I watch his defense, I just feel like I'm scratching my head going, what was the plan here aside from just talent winning out or pure chaos? And it seems that way to me, but I have to hand it to him. He has these dudes playing like someone is attacking their family. Like these guys are playing their hearts out. They're playing with every inch of effort in their body. And it's fun to watch, and they're playing good football.
Yeah, I mean, you're not off. Like a lot of people didn't exactly have Washington at this level. Like I'm trying to think of the other teams. They're certainly one of the top 5 surprise teams of the season thus far. Again, whether that means they return a little bit more to what the mean is down the road, I don't know. But they've got good weapons, right? What we always know about football is that even if you have okay talent, but you have a really good quarterback, that can rise you up a little bit. And right now we're kind of seeing that partnership between Kingsbury and Jayden Daniels really be able to, they're taking advantage of very poor defenses, like not very physical defenses. And so has the schedule helped me a little bit? Sure. But we're hypocrites to just point that out because the same can be said about our Chicago Bears. But again, I think overall talent-wise, I agree with you. I thought Washington was going to be one of the poorer teams in the league. Even I was surprised at 5-2 being their record, and against the spread being 5-1-1. But a lot of that, we'll see if this trajectory continues with their team.
Yeah, and I mean, it's easy to sit here and say, "Oh, their schedule's been easy." I mean, that offense was still moving the football just fine against the Ravens. It wasn't as efficient. They didn't put up as many points, but they were still doing their thing against the Ravens, put up 21 points, over 300 yards. I mean, granted, offense today, you're probably looking at 350 is what you're really going for, if not a little more than that. But still, that's a good Ravens defense, and they hung in there punch for punch with the Ravens. So, I mean, when Jayden Daniels is out there, this unit's playing really strong football. However you want to dice it up. I mean, I know we had some mention in the comments of college football and it being a college scheme, and I think there's some validity to that. But here's the tough thing. At the college level, someone might say, oh, that's a high school offense they're running. Colleges steal concepts from high school teams, from high school coaching. You know where NFL steals concepts from? College. Cliff is doing something right now. I can't even put my finger on it, but no, people haven't been able to stop it. So until you're able to stop it, and I do we'll get to this a little later in the keys to the game. I do think there are ways to attack the offense that they run and to limit it, but the NFL hasn't found it yet. And until they find it, it's going to keep being a good offense. Like we're not talking about them chewing up. Like when I look at the DCs they've played, like they might not be a good defense, but I'll tell you what, their D coordinator, Lou Anarumo, he's a smart guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like these are smart defensive coordinators that they are scheming up against and beating with the college offense. So I don't think it's anything to take that lightly, but I do think there are ways to beat it. It's just, to me, a question of finding those aspects, finding those, those competitive advantages within the scheme and their tendencies, what they do when they're in, one, how do you keep them from getting to second and manageable? Two, what do you do with how there are so many aspects to finding tendencies within an offense that can put them in a spot that they don't like to be. And that's something that I don't think they've been in a spot of a lot this year. And I don't have it well thought out. So I'm not I don't think I'm even making a lot of sense right now, to be honest. I just want to make that clear to anyone watching or listening. But there are ways to beat most offenses when there's a lack of talent. And I do think this offense has a lack of talent outside of the quarterback position and the running back, the number one running back, and the wide receiver one. Outside of those three, I think there's questionable stuff all over the roster, and they've been doing a lot of stuff with scheme. And I think that has a limited shelf life. They might still be okay after that, but I don't think they're going to be excelling at the level they are.
One thing I'm confident about is you're right. People really haven't been able to figure out this offense yet this year, but if there's one guy who I do feel pretty good about having a bye week to prepare for this offense, it's Eberflus. He's kind of the card that we have in the back pocket that I'm looking forward to seeing what he's seen on tape and what kind of differences he's going to make against the Commanders. And I think it might have been Pat, the designer for ESPN Bears, brought up a really, really good point. Again, stressing the importance of this game. If Eberflus can show a game plan to beat these Commanders, well, the Commanders' next X amount of games is interdivisional against their own division. So you're talking about an opportunity of giving other teams the same game plan to beat them. And so, again, if this is a team that we're going to eventually have to compete for with a wild card, we can hopefully, in a way, not just defeat them, but, knock them out of the race, essentially.
Yeah, and so I'm glad you bring that up, Eberflus off the bye, because that's something I think I want to mention here, that Matt Eberflus is 1-1 off the bye, but he is 2-0 against the spread in those games. Like one of them last year, that they beat Detroit pretty handedly, 28-13, as 3-point dogs. And then 2 years ago in Eberflus's first year, they played Philly at home. Philly went to the Super Bowl that year, and they only lost by 5 after being 9-point dogs. So I think there is something there to Eberflus on extra rest. I even looked it up. When the Bears have had 8+ days rest, which I probably should have done 9 if I'm being honest, because this is Sunday to Monday Night Football. That's 8 days rest. But still, on 8 days rest, they're 5-2 against the spread. They're 3-4 overall, but when you're talking about a team that had the number 1 overall pick 2 years ago, I do think the total record doesn't matter as much to me as against the spread record, because that tells me you were exceeding the expectations for your team in that game pretty consistently. In seven times on that extra rest, you've covered 5 of them. So I do think there is something to that. I do think there's a real chance Matt Eberflus has been sitting in his basement for the last 2 weeks just watching Commanders tape to figure out their offense. And I'll tell you what, that guy's been in the league for a long time. He's seen a lot of things. He has drawn up stuff that has been stolen by other teams to stop other teams. I think that how he played Detroit last year gave teams a bit of a book on what to do against Detroit. And Detroit had to adjust from there. And I think there was a little bit of that with the Eagles 2 years ago as well, where he found flaws in what they were doing and ways to attack them And once that was on tape, teams started to take advantage of it. Now, what they do from there, after a few games of teams taking advantage of it, you have to adjust back, right? That's the NFL. It's all a giant chess match. But I do think there is some validity to what you're saying about Eberflus at the bye having this extra time to figure stuff out.
Yeah, and if the Bears are able to figure it out, and then the pressure is going to be on Cliff, on Dan Quinn, and Jayden Daniels to counteract that. Like you said, this is all a big chess match. So if Jayden all of a sudden runs into some sort of pressure or physicality, and the game plan goes out the window, well, then how does he adjust? Our staff, I'm pretty confident. Caleb, I've seen him his entire college career. I think he's going to be able to adjust Jayden Daniels. I do think there's a couple more questions out there. And, the fact that he got hurt isn't too surprising to me. I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a little bit just because of his play style. But, all in all, I guess just to circle back to your original point, this is the Washington Commanders team, which I think on paper is not a 5-2 team. But, all credit to them. You can only win the games ahead of you. And, they've got really good quarterback play. They've gotten really good. They've got an offensive genius when it comes to their offensive coordinator. And that's what's given them 5 wins in the first 7.
Texas Tech legend Cliff Kingsbury. Before we get to the next section, I want to shout out Ron in the comments, our co-host. He's at the Blackhawks game right now, checking in from the United Center. And then Scott from Iowa mentioning that the Commanders play cover one man 29% of the time. Keenan Allen and Romo Dunze are going to have a chance to have big days, he thinks.
Yeah, I appreciate Ron checking in. Hopefully that game's going to have as many points as his Blackhawks game that he's watching right now has, because I think there were 6 goals in the first period. But like Ron checking in, all of you who are watching this, I think we have about 17 people in here. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Q, myself, Ron, we're here multiple times a week giving out content. This costs you guys nothing. And trust me, it helps this channel grow, and it sends it to other Bears fans just like us.
We just want to grow, guys. We want to grow. We want to keep bringing you good content. The only way for us to do that is hitting those buttons. Now that we've said that, let's get to our next segment here.
The baddest man.
In this segment, we are talking about the baddest men on the Washington Commanders roster. These are the guys who, after the game, they're around as they're walking off the tunnel and go, it's a bad man right there. Sonny, who do you got on this Commanders defense as your baddest man?
Thank you for letting me go first, because I'm going to take the easiest answer on the board, and that's obviously Bobby Wagner. The guy is a game changer. He's a guy that you're going to have to, with the not ideal play of their secondary, I think Bobby's the one guy who can control the outcome of the game compared to his counterparts. And so, yeah, I mean, he's worth everything that they've given him. And I'm looking at that PFF grade, 90%. Wow. Okay. So, that tells you that the proof is in the data too.
Yeah, and that's not just his PFF grade. That's a combination of PFF grade and his snaps over the last 2 years, his snap percentage relative to his team's total defensive snaps. So it's my play on PFF grade, because I think, sometimes you can get in here like a guy might have a really high PFF grade, but only played 100 snaps on a full season. And it's like, okay, that's deceiving. So I tried to find a mix there. But yeah, I mean, Bobby Wagner's been, I didn't think he was still doing it that well this year. His PFF grade is at 84.9 right now. He's still playing some really good football. Wow. And he, I almost wonder, I can't sit here and say I've watched a ton of Commanders tape, but I wonder if this Dan Quinn defense is just a lot more downhill than what he's been involved with previously, and a lot less coverage responsibility, is letting him play a little more free, which is allowing him to bypass some of the concerns that come in coverage with linebackers as they get older, because he's playing a more downhill game now, a more instinctive game now, as opposed to having to be in coverage against a running back, against tight end as often as he probably was previously. But that's just pure conjecture on my part. But for me on this defense, I'm there's a few guys I want to mention. Like Deron Payne has been an issue as a nose tackle in this league for a few years now. He's a good football player. I don't think he's playing the same level of ball that he was a few years ago. I think some of that comes from Jonathan Allen next to him is injured, out for the year. And I believe out for the year, actually. You should fact check that. But I don't think Allen was the same player that he had been the last few years. Last year, I thought he was starting to slow down. And this year, I didn't think he was as much of a problem as he had been earlier in his career, which I think has allowed teams to give a bit more attention to Payne. So outside of him, I'm thinking I want to mention Jeremy Chin, Steve Atwater's nephew, I believe. Jeremy Chin is just he's a demon in the best and the worst ways. Like, I think he can be beat, but he can be beat in coverage here and there, but he, again, downhill style of football. Dan Quinn loves these downhill attacking players who are just going to play instinctively. Those who might not know, if you watch Cowboys last few years, Cowboys defense was Dan Quinn the last few years. They were very attack the football, attack the player, get downhill, and there were coverage busts, but they relied on the takeaways to make up for those. And almost it's similar to what the Bears run, but very different. It's like we're going to give up yards and some points, but we're going to make the takeaways make up for it. Whereas like we're giving that up by we're going to have some mistakes because we're playing too fast and almost recklessly. Whereas Eberflus's style is much more, we're playing it very safe, so we're going to give up yards, but we're going to make the turnovers make up for it. It's a very different route to get to the same answer, but that's the beauty of football sometimes. Like, they're similar and so different at the same time. But Chin is a perfect player for doing that, in my opinion. But ultimately, for my baddest man on this defense, I'm going with Frankie Louvu. Because Frankie Louvu, he's playing the Micah Parsons role from Parsons' rookie year in Dallas, where it's very attacking, moved all over the formation, blitzing, running at the quarterback often. Louvu's got 4 sacks on the year right now, got 4 tackles for loss, 5 quarterback hits on top of it. Like, he is a demon. He is a physical nightmare. And he's a guy who the Bears offensive line is going to have to account for at all times because he's a linebacker. Like, he's not an edge rusher. They're going to scheme up a lot of simulated pressure, a lot of blitzes, a lot of different looks. They're going to make your O-line work. That's one of the ways you make up for a lack of talent, right? You make it harder on them mentally. So that's something that they're going to do a lot with Louvu, and he's got the goods to do it, man. I've seen this guy like, if I didn't see the quarterback stand up, I wouldn't have been surprised after some of the hits. Like, he is flying in there, taking guys' heads off.
Yeah, you're talking about top handful of linebacker units in the entire NFL. And they're kind of carrying that defense, especially, when we go into that next segment. Secondary wise, I don't know if anyone really jumped out at me all that much. So for me, as you kind of said, those linebackers are still capable of controlling the games by themselves. So it's how the offense reacts to that. And if they're able to kind of take them out of the game, that, increases our chances at winning. So I'm honestly not too surprised you went with Louvu.
Yeah, and so on offense, Sonny, where are you going for your baddest man?
Baddest man?
Yes.
Are we going with the assumption that Jayden Daniels is gone?
Yeah, let's start off assuming that Daniels isn't playing, and then after we both give our baddest man, we can talk a little about Jayden Daniels just to make sure we've covered it.
Sure. I think McLaurin. I think McLaurin's the easy choice here. There's a stat which people are trying to use to disparage Daniels and how much he goes to his first read, but I don't necessarily see that as a negative. I think when McLaurin is the guy that you're looking at, he's a guy who can get open. I want you to throw him the football, and I think he's going to be the key on the offensive side, just to be able to stop. I'm very grateful that we have possibly the best cover corner in the NFL that's going to be guarding him. But you stop McLaurin, and then all of a sudden that puts a lot of pressure on the other guys, especially if Daniels is not playing to try to score 20, 24 points that it might take to win this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think Scary Terry's a good option here. Let's see, he's put up 454 yards through the first 7 games, 4 touchdowns, caught something ridiculous, 70%, 71% of his passes or his targets. He's a really good football player. And this is probably the best quarterback he's had since Justin Fields at Ohio State. And you could make a strong argument right now Jayden Daniels is better than Justin Fields. So he's been putting up numbers in this league for a few years now without strong quarterback play. And he finally has what appears to be a good quarterback throwing him the football. That's going to go a long way. And he's a tough matchup. And one of the questions I had while I was thinking through this matchup is because I see this a lot on Bears Twitter right now, just put Jalen Johnson on the right side of the field and leave him there. And what if this is the game they say, well, we're just going to keep McLaurin on the left side all game. We're going to keep throwing to him. You know, like, I mean, I feel like that's the next answer to that of like every time you start to get too comfortable with your number one corner, your shutdown guy on the right side, they just put their best player on the left and attack that. Like, I don't think Daniels is incapable of throwing left. I don't think he's as comfortable as he is throwing right and rolling right. And I think it does take away some of the options, but I do think there are ways that they can match that up too.
If Daniels plays, Mariota's been in the league a lot longer. So, like, all of a sudden, I don't think he would have the same issues that a young quarterback might have. But overall, the pressure's on them because they're going to have to figure something out to try to get Scary Terry these catches because he is their biggest offensive weapon outside Jayden.
Now, for me, baddest man, you went McLaurin, so I'm going with Brian Robinson. And this is one I'm interested in seeing how this goes because Brian Robinson's he's been really good this year, pushing 400 yards rushing, added in another 70 yards receiving. Eckler's really been their receiving back, but Robinson's a tough runner, man. He can break some tackles and he's got enough burst to make you pay after breaking those tackles. I'm curious to see how the run game works if Daniels isn't there because I have this feeling, and we saw this with Justin Fields last year. The run game took a giant step back when Fields was out and Bajan was in there. It was not hitting on the same level because the defense didn't have to constantly be spying the quarterback. If Mariota's the guy in there, he can move a little. Mariota, he's not immobile, but he's not Jayden Daniels. He's not the explosive threat. So suddenly you're playing 11 on 11 again. And I'm not sure, like Brian Robinson, he's done stuff in previous years. I'm just not sure if it's been as strong as what he's done this year. Like last season, he had 733 yards, averaging 4.1 yards a clip. This year, he's averaging 4.7 a clip. Like, so it's been a big difference getting Jayden Daniels next to him. And some of the O-line improvements, I'm sure, have helped that too. But I'm interested to see how this goes because I have liked what I've seen from Robinson this year, but it's so hard to parse what is the roster around a player versus the player. So I'm going with that for my baddest man because I think that's a guy you need with the Bears' issues against the run so far this year. That's the key to me. You stop Brian Robinson, I don't think Terry McLaurin alone can beat you.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. The more I think about it, they're going to need Robinson, especially if Mariota starts, just to, with the potential injuries we're dealing with in the secondary. If they can have both facets, a run game and a passing game working, that puts more pressure on Eberflus to, try to figure this out, especially if we are down. Have we got an update on Brisker and Gordon?
I saw Eberflus say they're coming along nicely and he's hopeful, but that's about it. That's all I've seen about it.
Okay. So, just keeping that in mind. If I'm the Commanders, I want a strong running game just so that you can set that up to, attack the backups on the Bears secondary.
Sonny, if you could add one Commander player to the Bears roster, who would it be?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. We took their best one last year. I'd imagine it'd be an offensive lineman, right?
You would think so.
Right? Like,
You would think so. Like maybe Sam Cosmi.
yeah. Because again, when I was looking at the units, the only one which I thought the Commanders might have an edge on was that offensive line, but it's not like a clear edge either.
So where I'm sitting with this is like, I could get a really good guard in Sam Cosmi, which I'd be, would make a lot of sense. And this is probably the meatball in me, being a Chicago Bears fan, is being like, the defense isn't good enough. Like, I have a really hard time not saying Daron Payne, because that is a hell of a third D tackle to throw in that rotation. And suddenly I feel like this defense is borderline dominant.
Yeah. I mean, I can see that too. There's not many, but this is a good thing, right? Like it's nice that the Bears are kind of at a position when it comes to how their roster is built, that I take a look at an opposing team's roster and no one jumps out at me as in like, I want to trade spots with them. Like I want that guy on our team. That's more credit to Ryan Poles for building, a pretty solid roster up and down.
And realistically, probably the most reasonable answer would be Tyler Biadasz, because he is a slightly above average center. And that is something the Bears could really use.
That's 2 levels above what we have. Yeah.
But let's move on. Let's move to our next segment here.
The nicest man.
In this segment, we're talking about what it sounds like. We're talking about the guy on the Commanders roster who you might ask to drive you to the airport, might help you move. Maybe he'll pay your bar tab at the end of the night. Sonny, who is your nicest man on the Commanders defense?
It's hard for me to say this because there's 2 guys I have in mind. I don't think you're going to say this one. You and I just kind of talked about him in the pregame or in the tailgating portion of the show, and that's former Illini Johnny Newton. If he's struggling as much as you're telling me he's struggling on tape, he's a rookie. It's hard for guys like that to, adjust to the NFL that quickly. I think you got to attack it. It's not our prerogative for waiting for him to figure it out. It's attack until they figure it out. If not, obviously he's their backup at this point. So you attack, you find a weakness and you attack it.
I think Newton's a good answer, and it hurts me to say that because I was pounding the table all draft season for Newton, and I'm still high on the prospect. I still think Newton has a real chance in this league to be a really good football player, but until the game starts to slow down for him, it's going to be tough to get there, because right now, like, the thing that differentiated him so much, his tape going into the draft, the reason I had a top 10 grade on him, and the Commanders got him for a steal, in my opinion, at 36, but was his hand usage. His hand usage was so advanced. And right now, it's not up to par for the NFL. Like, the game is still moving too fast for him. And I think those foot injuries that he dealt with have a lot to do with it, because he missed all of training camp. He didn't get out there very much. He didn't get very many reps with his teammates. He's not maybe he doesn't have a strong feel for the run stunts and the pass stunts that they're running, the assignments they're asking him to execute. It seems like he's thinking out there a lot and not reacting. I have faith that he will get to the point where he is reacting, but I still think it's too soon for him to do that. I just think when you miss all of training camp, there is a cost. And that, I think we're seeing it on the field right now. I think Newton is a good answer here. For me, though, I'm going with a guy who I was high on in the draft back in like 2019, maybe 2020. Noah Igbenogany, nickel corner.
He was my other guy. I just couldn't pronounce that last name, so that's why I went with the guy I was familiar with.
I was a big fan of this guy. You know what? It was the 2019 draft, because Vic Fangio had just left, or maybe it was 2018. Maybe Vic Fangio was still with the Bears, because I remember thinking, this is a Vic Fangio cornerback, and I trust Vic Fangio to coach this guy up, because he was so raw, such a physical freak, but so raw coming out. And he went to Miami Dolphins, spent a few years there, was consistently pretty burned in their coverage schemes. And then now he's gotten to the Commanders, and they've put him in the nickel here, or at least that's what I could see on the depth charts they had, and based on the snap usage last week, he played the most nickel of any player on their defense. So I put him there. If he's out on the field, you have a chance to burn him. Like he is over aggressive as a cornerback when he's left alone in coverage. Maybe they're playing a lot of 2-3 high. I did notice they're playing a lot of three safety sets. So maybe that's part of it. They're not giving him the chance to get burned. But if you can get him one-on-one against a Romo Dunze, against a Keenan Allen who can, on a third down, I think that's the guy you're going right at over and over, because Benjamin St-Juste, I think you can attack with speed because he doesn't have the long speed, but he's a long physical corner. I think he's a average to above, like slightly above average corner in this league. And Mike Sainristil was a guy who I liked in the draft out of Michigan this past year. I thought he was the motor of that Michigan defense. So I do see two serviceable corners out here. I see one that I have major questions about, and that's Noah Igbenogany. Now, Sonny, on the offense, where are you going for your nicest man?
I mean, can I say Mariota? I know his last win was when?
2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean,
when he was on the Netflix show.
I'm not talking about his performance against Carolina, which I guess he threw for 200 yards, I think, and 2 touchdowns. We saw Carolina up close just a couple weeks ago. There's nothing impressive about that. I think we need to make Marcus's life hell and make him wish that he retired instead of collected paychecks as a backup quarterback. I just don't think he's got the skill set necessarily anymore. Well, he never really did to be a starter in the league. And so if our defense is supposed to be as good as we all think and we all claim it is, then, Jayden Daniels going down is a huge break for us. And we need to take advantage of, sub-average quarterbacks, of which I think Mariota is one of them.
Yeah, I think Mariota is a guy who you can talk about in that sense. He is a backup quarterback in this league. Matt Eberflus, if there's anything we learned last year, his defense tends to feast on backup quarterbacks. I'm not sure if that's exactly where you want your schematics to be, like, oh, we kill backup quarterbacks, though. But he does. He kicks backup quarterbacks' asses flat out. He has consistently through even back to his Indy days. I feel like that was a big part of like their numbers there was them just feasting on backup quarterbacks. So maybe Mariota is going to be different with this one. Maybe Cliff's scheme is really that strong right now. But I do think if Mariota is the starter in this game, I feel pretty good about Matt Eberflus's defense stepping up and, making life pretty tough on him. Now, for me, I'm going with a guy who's actually looks pretty solid on this. That's Andrew Wiley. So he's graded at 72% on this, or the 72nd percentile, however you'd like to see it. But 64.1 PFF grade, but he plays all the snaps. Last year, 69.2, plays all the snaps. Very average right tackle, right? But you look at his game against Baltimore, his game against Tampa Bay, his game against the Giants, even his game against Cleveland. He was a little better in pass protection in that game, but the run blocking was really, really rough. When he goes up against some of these top tier edge rushers, he hasn't fared great. That's the matchup I want to attack with Montez Sweat. Montez Sweat is going to be playing over the right tackle in his revenge game. In the game where against the team that drafted him and said, "Oh, we like you, but we don't want to pay you." That's got to hurt as a player, right?
Absolutely. I was going to bring this up later. You hope that Sweat is able to kind of duplicate the game DJ Moore had. Yeah. It's the same idea. Like you understand this is a business, but there's some things, some personal feelings that sometimes you just can't help but ignore. And the fact that Washington was so ready just to give up on Sweat, and Sweat's played as well as he has for Chicago, there's you can imagine that there's a sense of I'm going to show him that's going to be happening with him on Sunday.
I mean, would you call this the house that Montez built?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I do think Andrew Wiley is probably a solid matchup for Sweat because I don't think his length is just average. He's a generally average athlete. Like I think that there are a lot of ways that Sweat can beat him with power, with speed, with length that are going to play into the Bears' favor here. And I think the motivation factor for Montez Sweat can only make it a little bit better. Of, this is the team that drafted you. This is the team that spent 4 years telling you, you get better at this, then we're going to come through for you. And he got better at things. And then they traded him to someplace he didn't want to go. Now, that all got straightened out, but that still got to hurt. You told these guys, I don't want to go to that team. And they traded you there. Like, it's something, I think. But let's talk, because I missed it in the baddest, man. What are you thinking with Jayden Daniels if he is the starter?
I mean, it changes everything. You know what I mean? It's one of those. We haven't played a quarterback like Jayden Daniels before. We've played pocket passers. We've played, a guy like Anthony Richardson who can run the ball. Stroud at this point, I mean, he can run, but he's mainly a pocket passer right now. We haven't really game planned against a quarterback who can do both. And so that's why I was kind of grateful that we had the bye week coming into this week, just to give us more time and Eberflus more time to, watch the film on Daniels. But the guy's such a weapon. He can do both. He can run the ball. He can pass the ball. So everything changes. I think we go from a strong favorite if Mariota plays to a coin flip if Jayden plays.
Yeah, I think that's fair based on what we've seen from the Commanders so far this year. I mean, like I said earlier, they went punch for punch with Baltimore. That was all I needed to see to say, you can't take this team lightly. They are just fighting every single down. It's like Any Given Sunday, the speech at the end of the last game we see in that movie of like, you're crawling for that inch. Like that's how it feels when you're watching Commanders football right now. These guys are playing just a gritty brand of football that is fun to watch. You hope that I believe the Bears are the more talented team here. And I think that should show out. But when you're talking about a team who's fighting like this team's fighting right now, it's always a bit of a wild card. And I think with Jayden Daniels at quarterback, that just adds even more wild card to it because he's an incredible athlete, and he is just executing at a very high level within the offense that he's being asked to execute. Now, let's get to our final segment here, and then we'll call it a day.
Keys to victory.
I'll start this one off. We're talking about the Bears' keys to victory. And this first one, this goes back to my draft profile on Jayden Daniels, who I had a first-round grade on him. I thought he was a impressive player. I didn't think he was a top 10 pick. I thought he belonged somewhere in the 10 to 20 range probably. But I thought there was upside there. And some of it probably, if I'm being honest, I just saw so much Justin Fields on his tape. And coming off the few years of Justin Fields, I probably was like graying that out of like, no. Like, I don't like that. I don't like that. But that brings me to my first key to victory. I want the Bears to self-scout their tape from the last few years. I want them to see what were teams doing to Justin Fields. Can we do that to Jayden Daniels? Will that be effective? Because I feel like there are a lot of similarities in the way the two players play. The primary difference being I think Jayden Daniels has a much quicker release, which is important. But outside of that, I think the way they read the field and the way they use their athleticism, the way that they take hits, as we'll get to in a moment, I think it's all very similar. And I think some of the answers to how you stop this Cliff offense are within what the teams have been doing to the Bears the last few years when Justin Fields was playing quarterback. As noted on the screen here, right now the Commanders offense is the 4th highest play action rate, the 3rd highest screen rate. They're doing a lot of stuff that the Bears were doing the last 2 years, as far as just from a macro viewpoint, right? It's hard to throw all that stuff into like, oh, that's the same thing, but like there are similarities. Sonny, let's get to the second key here that you so kindly gave me before the show.
Yeah, and again, this was a little bit, before we really knew. Well, I guess even right now we don't know whether Jayden Daniels is going to be gone or not. But as some of these viewers may or may not know, I cover a lot of college football with the Big Ten, Illinois. But just even though Jayden Daniels didn't play in those conferences, I watched a lot of him. And for a guy who I believe is 6'5", he's got like 4 or 5 inches on Caleb Williams, and yet Caleb Williams is like 5 inches or 5 pounds heavier. He's just not a big dude. Jayden Daniels, he's a playmaker, but with that comes downside. He's a guy who, if he can cut in instead of going out of bounds and gain an extra 3 yards, he will do that. He'll take the extra 3 yards in exchange of getting hit, and getting hit very, very hard. And from what I've seen in the NFL, he really hasn't adjusted. So the fact that he did get hurt already doesn't shock me too much. I think Jayden Daniels is an insanely talented quarterback. What I do worry about him, and we're kind of seeing it now, is whether his completely aggressive, maybe some would say reckless style, whether that is going to cost him games during the regular season. And so for the Bears, that's not our problem. If Jayden Daniels is playing, you make sure you hit the guy. If he don't do anything illegal, keep it, in form, but make sure that he's going to give you the opportunity. Take the opportunity. Really go after Jayden.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with this one. I actually had this one written down at one point, and then I was like, oh no, I got something better, so I kind of took it out. But then you said it again, so threw it back in. And it's the guy showed a penchant for throwing his body around like he's made of steel. Exactly. In college.
He does.
I mean, there was a play against Florida State last year where it was like, why the hell did you try to do that? Like, you just got crushed.
I don't think he knows how to slide.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has done a little bit better of a job in the NFL with it, but at the same rate, we're talking about a guy who is going to borderline set records for scrambling as far as the pure volume. Like, he is running more than any quarterback really has in a while. I mean, I shouldn't say break records, because I haven't fact checked that. I know that he is scrambling at a slightly higher rate than Justin Fields was, and Justin Fields was up there on the scramble rate. So he puts himself at risk for taking contact a lot. Make him take the contact, which is probably easier said than done. The guy's really fast, but anyway,
you got to catch him first.
My next key to victory here was to keep your head on a swivel. This is about Caleb Williams. This is about the offensive linemen, everyone on the offensive line. It's about the tight ends. It's about the running backs, anyone who is a part of the pass protection. You don't know where Dan Quinn is bringing the heat from. You just know he's going to bring it. So you have to keep your head on a swivel. You have to know your protection rules. You have to be aware of where you need to be and what you're doing. So 8th highest blitz rate in the league, 9th most sacks, 10th highest pressure rate. They're coming. Know your hot reads. Know your hot routes. Hit your hot routes. That's a Caleb thing, right? Goes a long way to beating the blitz. He's beat the blitz well, but I think it can be better. It can be quicker, and Dan Quinn's going to make sure he finds out whether you can or not.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a game where, Cole Kmet might have a big role in this game. Rome Odunze, who you and I were very high on, I think could be a key to this victory. Just be ready. I think that's what you mean by saying keep your head on a swivel. Just make sure you're ready. It's coming, and just make the right play. And it's just so nice to have a quarterback who we're confident can do exactly that.
Yeah, it means stay ready, but also literally look around. Keep your eyes everywhere. When you're not blocking someone, you need to be aware of what's going on around you. And then I think I had one more in here. Yeah. So last one I had was attack early and often. 4 of these 5 wins for the Commanders they had a 2-score lead in the first half. Make them play from a position they're not comfortable with. Make them play from behind. Make them like their offense. If you fall behind, their offense is high powered, right? Like they when Jayden Daniels is in there, they have the ability to put up points with anybody in a favorable environment. Though, if you can get them in a negative game script, we haven't really seen it. All I can tell you is that in both their losses, they fell behind early. I don't know that they can truly come back against a good defense and a solid to good offense that is playing in a positive game script while they're in a negative game script. I just don't know if they have the versatility to do that. And that comes back to the Justin Fields stuff. I don't know if the Bears had that ability with Justin Fields in the past because of some of the limitations on the quarterback. So that's the final key to the game for me.
And I think it's a great point when I saw it. It's like the Commanders are a great front running team. When things are going well, they can continue to put the pressure on you. And that's when you're kind of giving into what their strengths are. But you and I kind of talked about it, right? This talent-wise, the team overall isn't all that talented. And I do think that this is a team that if you get up early on, you can kind of take the air out of their balloon.
Yeah, so that wraps it for us. Sonny, do you have any final thoughts before we get to this game and then talking Sunday on the post game about it?
I think I hope I emphasize it enough. This is a game that the Bears need to win. I'm not going to say it's a must win, but it's the level below, especially if our aspirations are to get to that magical number of 10, which is what I think you're going to need to make the playoffs. If Jayden Daniels is out, that's a huge break for the Bears, and it's something that they got to take advantage of. If he plays, that's good for the NFL. They flexed this game for a reason. It'll be nice to see our quarterback go up against theirs and, to see who comes out on top. But I trust Eberflus. 2 weeks. I think he can figure something out with the defensive side of football to stop this front running team, as we kind of discussed just now. And I do think that the Bears are going to come out with a victory.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think they're in a good spot to come out with a victory, and it can be tough if Jayden Daniels in there. Like, for score prediction, I think I'm going with, I have a model I run every week over at Shaving Points Podcast that the model's spitting out 24-23 Washington, but that's assuming Jayden Daniels plays. And either way, that is such a toss-up score that it could go either way. I think I'm thinking something like 24-17 Bears. Or no, let's go higher than that. Let's go 31-20 Bears.
Can you pick a different number? Because that was my score. I'm kidding. It all depends on, if Jayden's playing or not, obviously. I think because that 21 is the magical number now, right? Like the one that we're all paying attention to, just because the Bears have gone so many games without allowing more points than that. If Jayden plays, I do have a lot of respect for what he's been able to bring, and I think that our streak is in jeopardy. If he doesn't play, I'll take off a field goal, and I'll say Bears 31, Commanders 17.
All right. It sounds like we're in lockstep on it. Sonny, why don't we get out of here the only way we know how?
Bear down, Q.
Bear down.